The bell above the door of Marlene's cut and color hadn't changed in the 11 years I'd been coming there. Same tinny little chime, same smell of developer and hairspray and something floral I never could identify. I hung my coat on a hook by the door the way I always did and settled into the chair by the window to wait. Marlene herself came out from the back, drying her hands on a towel, and she smiled at me the way she always did, wide and genuine, no performance in it. She'd been cutting my hair since I moved to Clarksville. She knew about my husband's passing. She knew about my knee surgery. She knew things I hadn't told my own children. "You look tired, honey," she said. "I didn't sleep well." She draped the cape around my shoulders and didn't push further. That was one of the things I loved about her. I'd driven to the salon on autopilot that morning. The appointment was something I'd scheduled 3 weeks earlier before everything started, and I'd almost canceled it twice. But my daughter-in-law had told me it was important to keep routines. She'd said that a lot lately. Keep your routines. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed. Let us handle the details. And I'd been letting them handle the details for going on 6 weeks. And I was tired in a way I couldn't quite explain to anyone. My son had called it transition planning. That was the phrase he used. Not selling my house, not moving me out. Transition planning, the way you'd talk about a company restructuring, like it was something efficient and necessary and no one's fault. I was 63 years old. I had lived in that house for 27 years. I raised my children there. My husband had put in the back porch himself, board by board, one summer when he took 2 weeks off work, just because he felt like building something. The magnolia tree in the front yard had grown from a sapling I planted the year my daughter was born. None of that was part of the transition planning. The papers were scheduled to be signed on Friday. This was Tuesday. I watched Marlene's hands in the mirror. She worked with the same unhurried competence she always had, sectioning and clipping, and I found myself thinking about the folder my son had left on my kitchen table the week before, thick with documents, tabbed with those little colored sticky notes. He'd walked me through it quickly, too quickly, pointing to lines marked with an X and telling me not to worry. His wife had a cousin who was a real estate attorney. Everything was already checked. I hadn't read it myself. I hadn't thought to ask if I should. "You doing okay?" Marlene asked. She was watching my face in the mirror. "I think so," I said. "A lot going on." She nodded and went back to work, and I closed my eyes and tried to let my shoulders drop. I don't know exactly when I noticed the voices. There was a storage room at the back of the salon. Marlene used it for supplies, extra towels, the big tubs of developer she bought in bulk. The door was usually closed. It was closed now. But the walls in that old building were thin, and I could hear something. Two voices, low and fast, and one of them I recognized. It took me a moment because the context was wrong. You know how sometimes you see someone you know in a place you don't expect them, and your brain has to catch up? I sat there blinking at my own reflection, listening, and then my brain caught up. It was my daughter-in-law. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew her voice. I'd known it for 14 years. She had a particular way of talking when she was negotiating something, a certain clipped efficiency, the way she'd sound on the phone with a contractor or a vendor. She wasn't being social. She was working something out. Marlene had gone very still behind me. I watched her in the mirror. She was looking at the storage room door, and there was an expression on her face I hadn't seen before. Careful, calculating almost. She set down her scissors slowly, without making a sound, and then she leaned forward and put her mouth close to my ear. "Don't react," she said quietly. "Don't turn around. Just listen to me." I felt my hands grip the armrests under the cape. "Your daughter-in-law has been in that room for 20 minutes, Marlene said. "She came in before you got here. She didn't make an appointment. She asked to use my phone because she said hers had died and I let her go in the back. I didn't think anything of it." She paused. "Then I heard her mention your address and your name and something about Friday. I was looking at my own face in the mirror, and I did not recognize it. She's talking to someone about a property sale," Marlene said. "I only caught pieces. But she said, and I'm telling you exactly what I heard, she said the signature was handled and the account information was already updated. The room felt like it had tilted slightly." "What account?" I said. My voice came out flat. "I don't know, honey, but I don't think she knows you're here." I had parked around the side of the building, out of habit, because the front spots were usually full. My car was not visible from the street. She wouldn't have seen it when she came in. Marlene's hand was resting lightly on my shoulder, and I realized she'd been watching the door to the back room in the mirror the whole time she was talking to me. She was a careful woman. She'd been doing this a long time and she knew how to read a room. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about the folder on my kitchen table, the colored tabs, the lines marked with an X, the way my son had rushed through the explanation, standing by the door with his jacket still on, like he had somewhere to be, the way his wife had squeezed my hand at the end and said, "Don't worry, this is the right thing." I remembered thinking it was a strange thing to say without being asked. I thought about the account information being updated. I had a savings account my husband and I had built together over 30 years. We'd been careful people, not rich, but careful. It wasn't a secret account. My son knew it existed. He'd helped me log into the bank's website once when I couldn't remember my password. That was about a year ago. "I need to make a phone call," I said. Marlene nodded. She handed me her own phone, the one from her apron pocket, without another word. I stepped outside through the side door into the small alley that ran behind the building, and I called my bank. I had the number memorized. My husband had always said you should memorize your bank's number the way you memorize your doctor's, for emergencies. The woman who answered was patient. I explained that I wanted to verify no changes had been made to my account. She asked for my verification information and I gave it, and she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "I do see that an address change was submitted 3 days ago and there's a pending beneficiary update." I leaned against the brick wall. "I didn't submit either of those," I said. She said she could flag the account and transfer me to the fraud department. I said yes. The conversation that followed was the most important 20 minutes I'd spent in years, standing in an alley behind a hair salon in a paper cape with my hair half done, and I was completely calm the entire time. I don't know where the calm came from, maybe from somewhere past the fear, somewhere that understood this was the moment and falling apart would cost me everything. By the time I went back inside, the storage room door had opened. My daughter-in-law was standing in the middle of the salon. She saw me and her face did something complicated. "Oh," she said, "I didn't know you had an appointment today." "It's a standing appointment," I said. "I've had it for 11 years." She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. She said something about being in the neighborhood, needing to use a phone, and she laughed a little, and I watched her the way I used to watch my children when they were small, and I knew they weren't telling me something. You learn a certain kind of watchfulness when you're a mother. It never fully goes away. "I'll see you Friday," she said. "You will," I said. After she left, Marlene finished my hair in near silence. At one point she caught my eye in the mirror, and I shook my head slightly, and she nodded, and that was enough. I drove home. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes looking at the magnolia tree. The new growth was just starting, pale green, soft at the edges, the way it always was in early spring. Then I went inside and I called my own attorney. Her name was Helen, and she'd handled my husband's estate. She was in her 70s, sharp and unhurried, and when I told her what I knew, she did not express alarm. She asked me to bring her the folder. I told her I could be there in an hour. I went to the kitchen table. I picked up the folder. I sat down and I read it, all of it, every page, every line, including the ones not marked with an X. It took me almost 2 hours. There were things in that folder that my son had not walked me through, a secondary power of attorney already notarized. I did not remember signing anything like that, but my signature was on it. And when I stared at it long enough, I thought I remembered a day about 2 months ago when my daughter-in-law had brought over a stack of papers she said were insurance updates, and she'd sat across from me at this same table while I signed where she pointed. I'd trusted her. I'd had no reason not to. The POA gave her the authority to act on my behalf in financial matters. The real estate transaction listed a sale price about $40,000 below the assessed value of my house, with the proceeds going into a joint account I had never opened. I made a copy of every page on the little printer my granddaughter had helped me set up in the spare room. I put the originals back in the folder. I drove to Helen's office. She read it without expression. Then she set it on her desk and looked at me. "Did you knowingly sign a power of attorney?" she asked. "No," I said. "I signed something that was described to me as insurance paperwork." "Do you still have access to your bank accounts?" "I put a fraud hold on them this morning." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. You did everything right." Helen made 3 phone calls while I sat in the chair across from her desk. 2 of them were to people I didn't know. One was to a detective she apparently knew personally, the way small city professional people sometimes know each other. The detective came to my house that evening. He was younger than I expected, methodical, and he listened without interrupting while I told him everything. He asked good questions. When I was done, he looked at the copied documents and at the bank's written confirmation of the unauthorized changes, and he said he wanted to reach out to the district attorney's office. I asked him what would likely happen. He said he couldn't promise outcomes, but he said what had been done or attempted was financial elder abuse, and that it was taken seriously. Elder abuse. I turned that phrase over in my mind for a few days. It was strange to be the elder in question. I didn't feel like an elder. I felt like myself, the same person I'd been at 40, at 30, someone with opinions and memories and plans, someone who had simply been trusting the people she loved. I called my son. He didn't answer. I left a message. I said I needed to talk with him, that I'd learned some things, and that I loved him, and I hoped we could figure out what had happened together. I tried to say it plainly, without accusation, because I still didn't know exactly how much he knew. The detectives had asked me to give them a few days before the family knew anything. He called back the next morning. His voice was strange, careful in a way it usually wasn't with me. He said everything was fine. Friday was still on. Don't stress about the details. I said the sale isn't happening on Friday. Silence. Mama, I've spoken with an attorney, I said, and a detective. I know about the power of attorney. I know about the joint account. I know about the joint account. I know about the changes to my bank profile. The silence was longer this time. What followed over the next several weeks was not something I'll go into completely because parts of it belong to other people and to courts and to a process that was still ongoing the last time I thought too carefully about it. What I'll say is this: my son had known some of it, not all of it. His wife had been moving pieces without his full understanding, taking advantage of his willingness to defer to her on anything financial because she was, as he always said, the detail person in the relationship. I don't know whether that makes what happened better or worse. I've stopped trying to decide. What I know is that the house is still mine. I spent a Saturday afternoon in late spring on the back porch my husband built, drinking coffee the way I like it. Too strong, a little cream, and listening to the neighborhood. Kids somewhere down the street, someone mowing, the specific quality of light in late afternoon that I'd watched from that same spot for more than 2 decades. The papers the detective's office needed eventually filled a manila envelope nearly an inch thick. Helen had told me to keep a copy for myself, so I did. I have it in the filing cabinet in the spare room, next to my husband's old insurance policies and the deed to the house. Some days I take it out and look at the cover page. Not out of anger, or not only out of anger, mostly to remind myself what I almost didn't do. I almost let the appointment slide. I almost let someone else handle the details. I almost signed on Friday without reading anything. I think about Marlene standing behind me in that salon chair, choosing to tell me something she didn't have to tell me. She could have minded her business. She could have assumed she'd misheard. She had nothing to gain from involving herself and something to lose. She'd told me later that my daughter-in-law came back in afterward and asked who'd been there, and Marlene had said just some regulars. I brought her flowers the next week. She acted like it was nothing. That's the kind of person she is. I didn't make it easy on the people who'd tried to take what was mine. I'm not sorry about that. Some people will tell you that forgiveness means releasing your right to consequences, and I disagree with that entirely. Forgiveness is something I'm still working on, privately, in my own time. Consequences are something else. My daughter-in-law faced charges. My son cooperated with investigators. We are not close anymore, but we are in contact. My grandchildren still come on holidays. I serve apple cake, and we don't talk about it, and that is the arrangement for now. The magnolia bloomed fully that year. It always does, whether I'm watching for it or not. But I made sure I was watching. If there's anything I'd want someone to hear from all of this, it's something that sounds simple, but took me 63 years and almost everything I had to really understand. Reading something is not the same as being told about it. The people who love you will explain things to you. The people who need something from you will explain things to you too. And in that moment by the table with the folder and the colored tabs, those two sentences can look exactly the same. Read the thing yourself, every page, even the ones without an X. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I'd canceled that Tuesday appointment. I almost did. I almost called Marlene the morning before and said I was tired, that I'd reschedule, that everything felt like too much. And if I had done that, if I had stayed home with my coffee and my kitchen table and that folder full of colored tabs, I would have walked into Friday completely blind. I would have signed. I would have handed over the house my husband built his life around and the savings we were careful about for 30 years. And I probably wouldn't have known what had been taken until it was far too late to take it back. That's the part that stays with me, not the anger, though the anger was real and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What stays with me is how close it was, how the whole thing turned on one Tuesday appointment, and a woman who chose to say something she didn't have to say. What my daughter-in-law did was deliberate. She had been patient about it, months of small moves, an insurance form here, a logged-in account there, a rushed explanation at the kitchen table with my son standing in his jacket like he had somewhere to be. She understood that trust could be used slowly, the way water works on stone. She understood that someone who loves her family will stop asking questions if you keep reassuring her that everything is handled. She was right about all of it. She had read me correctly. And she had simply not counted on Marlene. That's how these things work, I think. Not in the dramatic way we imagine, where someone swoops in and saves the day. It's quieter than that. It's a woman who notices something and decides it's not her business to look away. It's an attorney you called once 4 years ago, whose number you still have. It's the habit of memorizing your bank's phone number because your husband told you to, and never quite unlearning it. The outcome wasn't luck. It was the accumulation of small, unremarkable decisions that turned out to matter enormously. I'm not wise because of what happened to me. I was trusting to a fault, and I paid for that almost completely. But I think there is something in what I learned worth saying plainly. Your instincts will tell you when something is moving too fast. They will tell you when an explanation has too many reassurances in it. They will tell you when someone is standing in their jacket at your kitchen table and they should probably sit down. I had all of those feelings. I just hadn't yet learned to treat them as information. Marlene treated them as information. Helen treated them as information. Helen treated them as information. The detective who came to my house that evening and asked careful questions, he treated everything I said as information, not as an old woman being dramatic. The house is mine. The savings are mine. My son and I are still finding our way back to something that resembles trust, and I don't know how far we'll get. But I am still in the home where my children grew up, and the magnolia I planted the year my daughter was born bloomed this spring exactly as it always has. You don't have to be fearless to protect yourself. You just have to be willing to read the thing yourself, every page, even the ones without an X.